Welcome back to the Old Barn on Ann Street. I hope you had a very good week. And if you didn't get a chance to watch last week's episode, I'd encourage you to go back and watch that, because last week we showed the installation of the floor, the new old floor in the entryway on the side of the barn, and I'm really excited about the wood we used, and I want to tell you a little bit more about that. As I'm putting down this floor, I thought I'd just stop for a second and talk about this wood. As you know, throughout the project here, we've kind of repurposed wood that we found in other parts of the barn. There was a lot stored up in the rafters and laying around in different parts, and so we've repurposed it for the walls and now the floors of this barn to preserve the history. Now, this piece of wood is older than this barn is. And here's how we know that. I think you can see in the video, there's a Roman numeral 10 there and then a 1. So it's like a Roman numeral 11 etched into this wood. What this means is when many of the Loyalists moved here in 1783, they brought their homes with them. Believe it or not, they took apart their homes in New England, most likely, put them on the ship, marked them with Roman numerals, put them on the ship, brought them here, and then put their homes back together. I guess like a Lincoln Logs kind of a thing, or Lego type, a life-size Lego project. And so this piece of wood has one of those Loyalist markings. So it's older than this barn is. So who knows how old the wood was before they brought it here. But this is the floor. I'm so excited that this is the wood that's going to go on the floor here in the entryway. There's a number of the pieces of wood here that have the Roman numerals in them. And this is a way of just kind of revealing some of the history, showing it as people come and go on this floor. I'm pretty excited about it. I just love the floor we've installed in this side entry to the barn. I love that the history of the barn is on display every time you come and go from the barn. But there is some history of the barn that I want to show you today that isn't so easily seen, and it's quite hidden from view. So I want to show you one of my favorite things about this old barn on Ann Street. Here we are in the entryway with the newly finished floor. And I want to take you inside this door to talk to you about the age of the barn. We've talked about the Loyalist markings on the floor and how old that wood is. But you open this door, and there's one of my favorite parts, this trap door, which takes us down into the barn basement. We call it our speakeasy barn because it's kind of like Janet's a place where Janet can have her secret pottery guild meetings, if there is such a thing. But it's down this stairs. And fun fact, about a month after we bought the barn, when I was walking down the old stairs, they collapsed underneath me, and I had to rebuild the stairs. But they're nice and sturdy now. So now down here, we've just made it into some storage. We've got a lot of stuff just thrown down here. We haven't really organized it for today's video, but I want to take you into the back part of this basement. Now, there's another door down here because it goes into the other half of the basement. The basement is split in two. And you go back here, and it's much more rustic. It's got other things here. It's got a dirt floor. Here's the rest of the wood that we have that we've, from all the different parts of the barn. Not a lot of wood that we can use anymore on walls or things like that, but we'll find a good use for all of that. Here, fun fact, this is right under where they used to have the cows, and there was a trap door where it looks like they used to shovel the cow crap through the trap door and just into the basement here. And that was probably 100 or so years ago. That's probably some of the best dirt in Shelburne. But the question is, how old is this barn? So we've seen that some of the wood is from 1783, but there are different things that happen because some of the building was obviously built later on. So what is the age of this barn? So here's what I want to talk to you about. Down here we are in this bottom part, the oldest part of the barn. We don't know anything really about this barn specifically. We know a lot about the house and the property in general, but none of the history references the barn, except we know that in 1783, a man named Paul Speed owned this property for 5 years, and he sold it in 1788 to a man named William Taylor, who built the house, and I think did some work on the barn as well. Because when the Paul Speed sold the property to William Taylor, the history says he sold it together with the dwelling houses and bake ovens erected thereupon. And so there were a few old houses, a few old bake ovens, and here is what I think was one of those original bake ovens. This spot in the wall looks like it could have been an old bake oven that somebody has filled in later. This is certainly the kind of a foundation they used in the 80s. And if you remember, upstairs there is the wall that has the cedar shake shingles. That's the wall right there. So you go upstairs from there, that used to be the outside wall of the barn. So what I think is that and that, where the bake oven is, are the original walls of the barn. I think this wall, because it's a different kind of a foundation here, I think it was added later, and certainly the woodworking around the window was added at a later time. But the thing is, so this I think goes back to 1783. However, the rest of the barn I think is dated a little bit later. Up above here is where Janet sits when in her pottery studio, where she makes her pottery, and it's her workstation. One of the first jobs we did when we moved into the barn was we repaired some of these wood. There was some rotten wood right there. We took out a few rows of that and repaired it. When we did that, between the two levels of the wood, there was some newspapers from 1892. So obviously that floor was built in 1892. So what I think happened was that in 1783, this was the original footprint of the barn. But in 1892, when John Williams, later on the man who owned this property the longest, he must have built onto it and expanded it, and from here up built on a new structure on the old foundation. Maybe that's when he added this foundation as well. We don't know. But it seems to me that this barn was built in different stages, but there are certainly parts of the barn that I think is a strong indication go back to 1783. That's why we still claim that the barn is circa 1783. Wouldn't you have loved to have a loaf of bread from that bake oven right here in the basement of our barn? Who knew? Who knew? Well, next week, we're going to continue our work on finishing up the entryway to the barn. Here's a clip from next week. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of The Old Barn on Ann Street. I hope you have a good week this week ahead. If you haven't yet become one of our subscribers, you can click on the portrait of the barn and become one of our subscribers. We would love to add you to our subscriber family. Have a good week. We'll see you next week on The Old Barn on Ann Street.